Good morning, America, and welcome to the Freedom News Source of the United States. Today I would like to talk a bit about family. I want to talk about family and the Constitution. It's going to be an interesting mix. So the first part of the Constitution, part of this little podcast-like kind of thing, I want to talk about a couple of our amendments and how they could be, vitally under attack by certain political parties. So, as a Republican, I want to talk about, how I think of the Democratic side of politics. And so when it comes down to that point, I want to focus more on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the democratic socialism. Because these ideas proposed by democratic socialism, especially from, Ocasio and Bernie Sanders, it's just kind of outrageous because you take a look at the United States Constitution, written and designed by our founding fathers, that, based this country off of God and freedom and just all kinds of outstanding things that really have just played an important part in a lot of American lives. And then you have people trying to throw down things like democratic socialism and socialism in general, and even communism, because really it all ties into the same idea. And so when you take a look at Cortez's Green Deal, the Green Deal states that it wants to provide free healthcare, free education, free food, free housing, things like that, more of a communistic idea in return for your labor. And within that new Green Deal, it also wants $23 trillion in funding to completely change over to all clean sources of energy. And while that is a great idea, the way it's been proposed is just outrageous. That's $600,000 per U.S. household to even get that plan going. But if you take a look in depth at the plan, it completely ends air travel, it completely ends car transportation, amongst other things, which could really vitally, affect the American infrastructure and economy. And then you take a look at other parts that just seem even more outrageous when Cortez states that she wants to use the new jobs created by the new Green Deal clean energy. She wants to use those jobs to abolish the gender wage gap and racism. Now, if you think about it, it's just more jobs. We have jobs in America. It's a capitalism country. We have jobs. You go out and get a job, whether it be, a low-down dirt job at a gas station or a high-up manager position for a store, all the way up to, the engineering and all these wonderful things that we have to offer. But it just does, something like that isn't going to get rid of racism and isn't going to get rid of this so-called gender wage gap. But when you really take a look at the big picture, is there really any problem with racism, or is it more of a thing created by the media to keep people fired up? Now, don't get me wrong, racism originates from the slavery of African Americans in America. When people think of slavery, racism, that's what people think about is slavery. But, your modern day African American has never been enslaved. They haven't really had to experience a whole bunch of racist experience. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't racist people out there, but the media makes it look like every white person out there is just going to be some racist hillbilly that, wants to kill black people, and that's just not true. That's just no longer a big issue as it, used to be back when there was, a lot of segregation between African Americans and white Americans. And so, as time progressed, that just kind of disappeared. But when you get these large news outlets that make a big deal about racism, it kind of keeps the idea alive. And I think that that's really the main source of this said racism amongst people. And then when you take a look at this so-called gender wage gap, is there really a wage gap? Because in my beliefs, the harder you work, the more you get paid. Now, it isn't always like that, so don't think, oh, yeah, you're some kind of retard talking big. No. I'm getting at the point here that there's just certain things that are going to pay more than others, and if you expect, ladies, a lot of you, I know that some of the ladies that I've met have gone for receptionist jobs and things like that, and you don't get paid as much, and sometimes it cannot be a livable income, along with teaching, which, both things can be a big problem. But when you compare, a man that has an engineering job and then a woman with a receptionist job, or a man with a construction job and a woman with some gas station job or something, and then say that there's a gender wage gap, you can't just earn money for doing a simple, easy job. As much as you don't want to hear that, it's true. You're not going to get as much money. But if you just spend your time right, go get a proper education, maybe even shoot for a college degree or a trade school, you could make more money than any man you ever meet. It's just all up to the choices that you make in your life. And so to say that there's a gender wage gap, I think is pretty outrageous, and I think it's a waste of everybody's breath. Along with racism, I don't believe that racism is really a big problem anymore. And the fact that the media focuses so hard on it, accusing President Donald Trump of, racist actions, what has he really done that's racist? He is preventing illegal immigrants from coming into the country. And if you think that it's racist to prevent illegal aliens from entering your country and sucking away at your economy, then you have a weird perception on racism, and it seems like you've kind of established your own reality for actual reality. Because if we were to just have open borders and let anyone in, which we sort of already do without knowing it, it just causes so many problems. Crime rates go up, we get a lot of drugs imported, we get a lot of sex trafficking, and it's just kind of a no good deal. And so with that subject on mind, is it really racist to just close those borders up? Now, I'm not saying that we don't let people in the proper way, because the proper way, we bring people over, we test them on, a bit on American history and whatnot, and it is kind of difficult to get into our country the proper way. But getting into our country the proper way, you deserve all the rights of any other American if you can get into this country the proper way. But to say that you come in illegally, you are not entitled to, free housing, free education, and free cars, and the American lifestyle, because it's just not something you worked for. And sometimes you have to work for things if you want to earn things. And so I think that's just absolutely ridiculous to even make a statement like that. And so, yeah, that's just kind of my look on it, on that subject. But back to the Green New Deal, is that, it's not going to abolish racism. It's not going to abolish this gender wage gap. That's just, that's just ridiculous to even make a claim like that by just trying to offer jobs for a deal that will never work. And then if you take it the actual, infrastructure of the Green New Deal, it truly doesn't make sense if you read into it. There's a lot of websites that kind of break it down for a good explanation of the Green New Deal, and you can also watch some of the news outlets that talk about that. Now, not every news source obviously is reliable, but you can still pull some relatively useful information from some of them. So past the new Green Deal, you have this idea of democratic socialism, and that Green New Deal ties a lot into that democratic socialism because, as I mentioned, it states the free housing, free education, and blah 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 blah. And so, I think that's another ridiculous thing, because a lot of people, and this is where I start to tie into the family part of this little podcast, is you have these people that really do support this democratic socialism, and I think that it's because a lot of these families, because I know from experience, I've kind of experienced sort of like this family, but not quite. But I've seen a lot of it with some of the people that I've met, and their families are just so dysfunctional. They're torn apart. Parents usually get divorced, and I've just noticed that there's a lot of people that are living this lifestyle, and they're just paying lots of money for pleasantries that they don't need, like internet, television, just wasting money, to a point to where the money that you get from your job is just not enough. And so then they resort to welfare for food, and a lot of these families end up buying, the cheaper end of food, the kind of food that just really is just packed full of preservatives and all kinds of chemicals that really do badly affect your health. And so I think that, that's another reason that we have a lot of obese Americans. Obesity is becoming a large problem, along with a lot of cardio issues, relating to the heart. And it's just a lot of the foods that we eat. And it all starts off with just being poor and wasting your money in different ways. Because I've noticed that a lot of poor families tend to spend a lot of money on things that they do not need for the time being. And a lot of people need to hear that. They need to understand that it's okay to save your money for a year or two, move up to a better house, and even to get a better job. Sometimes it takes just that. But keeping on top of everything is very difficult, especially as a single parent when you're raising, a kiddo or maybe more than one kid. And so, I understand that that's very difficult and it's a hard thing to do. And when you're so used to having a lot of pleasantries, it's really hard to cut off from those things. And so the best way to go about it, though, is just, spending your time, kind of separating your money up, dividing up what you need. And especially if you're getting welfare, that's a great opportunity to use some of that to buy healthy food from places like Sprouts or Uptown. And you can even go to Walmart. They've got, decent foods over there too. Just, you got to watch what are in the ingredients and the order that they're in. Because if you see something packed full of a bunch of chemicals that you don't even know them by name, that's usually a great indicator that the food is just not healthy for you to eat. And so I believe that these people that spend a lot of their time wasting all of their money, and they kind of just, have simpleton jobs, especially a lot of single parents. Now, I'm not saying that all single parents are like that. I'm just saying that I've noticed that some, and even parents that, families that are still together, I've noticed that there's just still not enough money for everybody in the household because a lot of it's spent on pleasantries. And from that point on, I think those households that have just become like that, they develop this like for this democratic socialism because it's like, hey, free healthcare, free housing, free education. That sounds like a really cool idea and a really good deal. But in the end, this democratic socialism is just essentially communism in disguise. And when you get these free things, they're not really free. You're going to have to do labor. Your land is going to be taken. Your job is going to be controlled by the government. Everything you do is going to be controlled by the government. Taking a walk in the street, probably got to get some kind of permit to do that. With this democratic socialism, is if it ever gets used in America, it kind of tears apart the whole American ideal. And I also want to talk about, Amendment number 2, our right to bear arms. When you have all these new gun control laws being passed to kind of regulate that, it hinders our ability as Americans to own firearms. And the original reason that we have the right to bear arms was because after we separated from England, we realized that we had to have, a good infrastructure to start on, and if our government were to ever become way too corrupt and we had to overthrow it and go against it, we were supposed to be able to have the same weapon technology as the military. Now, as time passed, a lot of people have become afraid of guns. Guns kill, wham, 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 wham. And it all kind of ties into that. And then everybody grows this fear of guns, and it deters Americans from wanting wanting civilians to have these type of weapons. And which is sort of understandable from a certain point of view, because we have some very advanced and very, very dangerous, weapon technology. But to have these laws like the red flag laws and restricted attachments and restricted types of rifles, like fully automatic rifles and weapons in general, whether it be a sidearm or a rifle, I just think that that's a bit unconstitutional, especially when you have the red flag law that I mentioned, where somebody can just kind of report you for acting suspiciously, without any more proof than that, and they just come over and take your firearms. That's kind of a violation of our one of our amendments. I'm losing my mind here because of just thinking about all of this that's happening is just kind of, if you really kind of process it, it blows your mind that people are getting away with doing this. All these unconstitutional things that just kind of tie into breaking down the American lifestyle and the American natural-born rights and freedoms that are guaranteed within our Constitution. And so another thing when it comes to freedom of speech, we have the right to talk about whatever we want. We have the right to protest against the government. We have the right to get together and meet on, certain subjects, whether it be, really just anything you want. And we also have the right to practice whatever religion we'd like. And so that's just, a huge advantage with America. And I believe that, a lot of other people from other countries, whether it be just some of their traditional beliefs, are really against that. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of other countries are really just not big fans of Americans, because we have all these freedoms and we do things so different from them. Like, a lot of Muslim countries are a good example. And so, from there, this conversation could go on for a long time about how our constitutional rights are being hindered and how the family unit is being broken down with all these modern things that we have. Because really, if you don't watch what you do, your water consumption, your food consumption, your time consumption, you can really just mess up your entire life and even affect your children's lives. And so it's just kind of good to shape things up and get things back on your feet. And it's okay to make some mistakes. It's sooner than later. You should probably fix yourself, though. Take a moment to process, some of the things that I've said, because a lot of people may disagree with what I've said. And if you do, leave a comment down below and let me know, and we can try to work this out and see who's a bit more proper. I'm not looking to argue. I'm looking to make logical, factual points. And if you're going to try to make an argument with me with no logical, factual points, then I do not want to converse with you on it. But I'm more than willing to hear anybody out. And so all you got to do is drop a comment down below, or you can email Freedom News Source. That's freedomnewssource@gmail.com. Freedom News Source @gmail.com. Alright, thank you for watching, my fellow Americans, and as always, have an outstanding night.